Welcome to our industry networking event focused on careers in information technology. I'm Catherine Jones. I work here for McHenry County College as the Associate Vice President of Workforce Development. I am thrilled to have this time to spend with those of you who are joining us virtually via the live stream, and those of you who will be watching this recording later on your own. These conversations are presented as a collaboration between McHenry County College and the McHenry County Workforce Network. Two terrific industry professionals are with us today, Lee J. Stewart and Eric Vicencio. Let me introduce you to Lee J. Stewart first. Lee J. Stewart is right here to my left, nearest left. He is the founder and managing director of Stratus Communications, Inc., located in Cary, Illinois. After spending 2 decades working as an IT director for a large manufacturing corporation, he used his experience and background to make a bigger impact in his local community, helping small and mid-sized businesses successfully manage their information technology environments. His IT knowledge base spans from desktop troubleshooting to setting up a global complex IT environment for a company with more than 50 locations and 13,000 users. He has IT experience in network, cybersecurity, server administration, application development, enterprise resource planning, manufacturing execution systems, project management, architecture design, and process development. Lee J., that was quite a list, and we were talking before that some of these applications are new to me and maybe new to you. So we're going to dive into those. And then his educational training includes earning a Bachelor's of Science degree in computer science from DeVry University. Eric Vicencio is a partner and chief information officer for Casella Technology. His training included earning a Bachelor's of Science degree in public health and health administration from Northern Illinois University, and an Associates of Science degree from Kishwaukee College, a fellow community college in Illinois. Prior to his current role, Eric used his education in healthcare and training in information technology and project management to work for 3 mid to large-size healthcare companies over a span of 10 years. His broad knowledge of HL7, HIPAA, SQL, security, networking, wireless, PCI, EMRs, and IT services, and his years of experience prepared him to lead the information technology division at Casella Technology. So we had some more of those acronyms and applications that we'll get into as well. The company, Casella Technology, provides hardware and software upgrades and technical support, project management, desktop server, network help, integration services, and assessments for compliance, security, and risk to small and mid-sized businesses. I hope that even hearing the bios that we have shared give you a little bit of insight into just the scope and possibilities of careers in information technology. I don't think we're going to run out of things to talk about today. I'd like to start by letting our audience get to know each of you a little bit more. I shared your bios. They told the what about you, but I'm a little bit more interested in the why about you and how your backgrounds pieced together to move you from where you were to where you are now. Eric, can we start with you?
Oh, I get to be the first one?
You get
Awesome.
Yes.
So yeah, let's go back many moons ago. When I started college, actually even before that, when I was in high school, I got into an early program to become a nurse, basically. Started that track, became a CNA at the age of 17, which was I had to have special permission to actually get that licensure in the state of Illinois. Um, and I started at Kishwaukee College in the nursing program and kind of saw that as my future. Um, all along in college, I was the individual that, out of all my friends, could fix everyone's computers. And it was right here telling me the entire time, hey, you should be doing this. I didn't listen. Made it to Northern. I was ready just to go heal, just jump right into the pool as a nurse, good to go. Had a couple of events that occurred when I was doing bedside care that I realized I really don't think I want to do this long term. So I shifted. I shifted when I made it to Northern, and applied those credits towards a health degree, a public health degree specifically. While doing that, I actually gained more familiarity with computers because I was still that individual that could help everybody on their computer, whether it's putting a new OS on there or fixing a virus. Because you college kids, I know how you are with viruses. Just saying. So it led me down this path to eventually, realize that I was really good at computers, and I knew that somewhere in the healthcare space I wanted to be working on computers. At the end of my degree program, I ended up in becoming an intern at Kishwaukee Hospital under the CIO to help them with a facility move. They built a brand new hospital, and they were basically leaving all their old hardware and putting all new in. So it was a great opportunity. Basically, it was 6 months where I was working under the CIO, and in that time, I actually rebuilt my computer. I would go back to the tech's office, grab hardware, bring it back up, put it in, and I actually had, at that point, a brand new computer by the time I was done. The CIO came up to me at the end and he said, hey, how'd you know how to do this? And I'm like, doesn't everybody? That's when I started my job with him as a technician. Made it up through the ranks as a technician to become basically an application specialist, where I worked on a mixture of very hardware-specific things with an EMR and also software. Because I had that clinical knowledge, I was already, I could speak computers and I could speak nurse. So I was kind of that weird blend. I worked for Kishwaukee for quite a few years. Eventually made the move to Swedish American Hospital in Rockford, and I worked there for many years. Eventually ending there as the director of infrastructure for Swedish American, which they have over 1,000 devices. So yeah, much different than what I'm doing now. I have the opportunity about 5 years ago to actually start this, and I knew Eder Casella and Co. Pretty well, and now I'm leading the technology wing. So that's me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. So with both of you, I'm going to play what was that acronym. So you said EMRs,
Yep.
and they are?
Electronic health or medical record, electronic medical, EHR, EMR, they're kind of intermixed all the time. So.
And you also talked about infrastructure services and the number of devices. So from a definition, define infrastructure for us.
Ooh, so I would define that as all of the hardware and software that goes into making a facility work together, in kind of more of a layman's terms. When you have, let's say, that many devices spanned across, Swedish American was the entire city of Rockford. Like, they have clinics everywhere, basically. The infrastructure are the pieces that make all of those clinics and all the hospitals talk to each other. Without them, you would basically none of it would work. So yeah, that's probably the simplest way I could explain it.
So that's one of those no pressure jobs.
Yeah, none whatsoever. Yeah.
Great. Lee J?
So, good afternoon. I started my career probably about 26 years ago, but even before that, I was an IT geek. My first computer was a Commodore 16. I think I was between 7 and 9. I can't really remember exactly the age. Wrote my first program to put my dad's business on digital, so we could actually look up billheads and stuff like that. And you got to remember, back then, there wasn't a Google to be able to search to say, how do you do this? You had to read the manuals and go through the process and trial and error, a lot of that. But anyway, so I've been in IT forever, since I started working, honestly. I was selling computers. I helped build a computer department for a retail organization, and then I got my first role in IT, kind of like what Eric mentioned, where I was an intern technician on the help desk, and I got to learn, what is TCP, IP, transmission control protocol, internet protocol, stuff like that, and how does it work. And I fell in love with how computers talk. It may sound strange, but it's just so simplistic in how they are communicating to one another that I think that's amazing to be able to make that and facilitate that in IT as a whole. But through the years, my positions have changed. My title's probably been 15 different things throughout my career. 14 of them I probably made up myself. But I've been doing cybersecurity network infrastructure, again, like Eric had mentioned, where we facilitated in my last role for around 15,000 users around the world, and one portion of that organization was pharmaceutical. So again, along with the quality control and things like that, the motto in the organization is, if we make mistakes, people die. So you put that pressure on, even the tech that's on the floor or the person that's packing the box. Love what I do. Have always had the opportunity to share a little bit with others on how to go about it and work with different groups. For me, right now, moving into Stratus Communications was being able to take the opportunity of what I learned in a big organization and start to offer that and bring that to small, mid-size organizations. Because believe it or not, technology is so integrated in everything we do, And small, mid-size organizations don't realize the capability often that they can get or what they can leverage by integrating that technology into their business processes. So one last tidbit is I focus on a people, process, technology approach. So really trying to make sure focus on people first, process second, and then technology.
The secret sauce of technology. I was thrilled when you both agreed to be part of this gathering, because these career talks that we are doing, this series, follows our key industries in McHenry County. Our key industries being manufacturing, healthcare, and IT. And I said to my colleague when you both agreed, we've got the entire economic base of McHenry County participating with us today. So we will draw on your background in healthcare, your background in manufacturing, Lee J, to thread this conversation through, because so much of IT takes place in those key industries in our community. So it is fantastic to have you here. We have a few questions that have come in. Thank you to those of you who are participating on the live stream, because we've captured your questions and we will share them with our panelists here. So you've been talking, both of you, a lot about your personal passions, what you learned about yourself along the way. You've both pivoted a little bit also along the way. But if I was to say what kind of person succeeds in IT, some of the character traits that might be beneficial. Let's maybe debunk some myths here around who succeeds in IT. Lee J, can I ask you to start?
Sure. Couple attributes that I look for, but also you can tell from people when you're working with them is, can they be adaptable, right? So being able to adapt in IT is critical because we work with many different things and the technology is constantly changing. So being able to really adapt to the situation, okay? And then one other key attribute is communication skills. Really, really critical. It used to be when you first started out in IT, it was considered you're going to go in this room somewhere and you're going to have you do something and eventually we'll be happy because you did it, right? Hopefully. But don't talk to me because we can't understand you,
Right.
right? So now it's a big deal that you really have to be able to speak in business terms, especially with organizations. But the communication in general is a key component.
Thank you. How would you make the perfect person, Eric?
So I get asked this question quite a bit, believe it or not, because often you run into IT people, people starting their career, and you run into these highly intelligent individuals that are creative but don't want to show the creative side. They're very thorough, but they have trouble communicating about some of those things. My biggest thing that I look for is the individual or the person that has the most curiosity. Curiosity of, okay, I have an issue. I wanted to figure out what the solution is. They've used the Google and they've figured out what the actual solution to their problem is. But then they never go back and ask the question of why. Why did this fix it? And the type of person and the personality trait is, why did this fix it? And how can I take that knowledge and absorb it so I understand why it fixed the problem? That curiosity, you can't teach that. The other thing is always the willingness. Individuals that work for me or have worked for me in the past, the one thing I always tell them is we're always going to be willing to sweep the floor. And what does that mean for an organization? If you get done with, you're mounting an access point in a ceiling and you've made rubble on the floor, that's not someone else's job to actually clean that up. It's yours. And the willingness to do that, or knowing, hey, there might be somebody that's going to do it, but at least you're willing to do it, okay? It's never below you. I've worked with some very high-level technicians, some very high-level Cisco engineers, and they were always willing to jump in and do other things that were not their job duties, because often they are very highly intelligent and they know some things about everything in IT, so they're always willing to help. And those are the individuals, those are the traits that I think are probably the most important to me. So,
Thank you. Let's turn and talk a little bit, now that we've talked about who succeeds and what we look for. Let's talk a little bit about the state of the industry. So you both talked about having been IT in-house organizations where IT was kept in-house. Now you're both working, I'm going to say outsourced, or you correct me in terms of terminology. But what's the future look like? How do companies go about obtaining IT services? What growth do you see? I'm guessing you're not going to say that we're going to be done with IT anytime soon. So I'm thinking those long-term horizons are good. But what are we looking at there? Eric, would you start?
So it's an interesting set of events that have happened over even the last 10 years. You look at any organization nowadays, and you look at their reliance on IT. If IT is not working, that company's generally not making money. They're not able to function whatsoever. Gas stations, for example, if their pumps all go down, they're not making money. So the reliance on IT is becoming more and more. On the other side of that token is we have all this IT happening, all this infrastructure, all these pieces going into place. You also have the bad guys out there, right? Trying to wreck the world. But on top of that, you also have some privacy things that are coming into play. Like California is a prime example of this. Europe has already done it, where you have all the privacy laws. So I think in the future, you're probably going to see more more jobs, more careers pop up in the privacy space, and putting some of those pieces into place for companies, because I think you're going to start to see privacy laws start to hit nationwide. And so what's it like to actually work in IT? It's kind of like riding a bike while you have a bunch of bears around you and you're trying to navigate through these bears without hitting one, and the bike's on fire. No, it's great. But
Eric, this is supposed to interest people in the career.
no, it's so it's never the same day twice. I absolutely love that about IT. You never will run into the same day 2 days in a row, because everything's changing every day. And if you don't have a tiny bit of ADD, it might not be a good suit, because it's often you're going down this avenue, but it's, there's a butterfly, and then you're going down again, and you're just like, oh, puppy. But really, it's it's a very interesting field to be in right now, and I can't say enough about it. It's great, because the technologies are becoming cooler and cooler every single time. I think I've got a good handle on high-level networking. A new protocol will come out, or somebody will have a new feature. Cisco will release something. You're like, wow, that's awesome. I'm sure you probably run into that as well, EJ.
All the time.
Yeah, I mean, even when I think back to how I worked 3-5 years ago, dramatically different than how I work today. And a big thank you to the IT professionals at MCC who have been supporting me all along the way. And a shout out to Paul Barra, who is making this live stream happen. Lee J, Eric mentioned cybersecurity, privacy. I know you are working in that cybersecurity space. How do you see that playing into not only the careers, but where companies are going to need to go?
So cybersecurity is a niche kind of area where you have to kind of understand and put yourself in attacker's shoes to be able to understand how they can get into environments and things like that. So as the technology, as Eric was mentioning, changes and adapts and adjusts, and a new feature comes out, chances are it's got a bug, right? Unfortunately, but it's got some kind of what they call an exploit associated with it. So the same thing that's happening with the new technology being released is happening on the other side, to say, how can I get that and use it to be malicious, and how can I protect against it through cybersecurity? So I'm a firm believer that if someone wants to get to something, they'll get to it. There's no way to stop them. What you want to do is be able to protect yourself in such a way that it makes it difficult. And then, what if? It's not a matter of if it happens, it's when it happens. So take that all into consideration. It's going to happen. So you have to think about, how do you hire, or do you outsource the skill set? One of my clients, I'll give you an example. They have probably 10,000 hits a day. This is minuscule, actually. People don't realize how many scans and hits they get against their firewall on a daily basis. And I'd be willing to bet your school probably gets 1 million plus a day, right?
Wow.
And how would you possibly dedicate someone to look through all that information to be able to define what's going on there? So you don't. You write programs. You have people that start to develop in cryptography so they can decrypt and stuff like that. So the careers that are there are going to continue to grow and become even more prominent and needed in the industry as a whole. Hopefully I answered the question.
It did. It's got me thinking now, because I'm okay. There's that, I'm not a sports fan, but I like some of the analogies. So there's the analogy of skating to where the puck will be. We use that in leadership, and I think it holds true in hockey. But if the industry is constantly changing, new technologies are coming in all the time, how does somebody skate to the puck and prepare training, experience? How do they jump into this constantly moving game? I let either of you pop in there.
So I'll give my quick opinion on this. It's you have to explore, right? You have to figure out what is your niche, because it's not everything is for everyone in IT. Some people like working with the desktop component. Some people like working with the network component. Some people like the application side. So the best way to really figure out what is the best area for you is to do some exploration. Get experience in these different areas so you can start to refine or define what is the best area for you to grow your career and to give more focus to. If you try to be a jack of all trades today, it's a little tougher, right? It's possible, but there's going to be areas where it's the saying is jack of all trades, master of none, right? So if you want to be a master, you can be, but just keep in mind it's much more focused in a specific area.
Yeah, and I totally agree. There's always a good foundation. Foundations to me are either experience, on the job experience, but really one of the bigger things is right here. Utilize the college, utilize the individuals teaching you, because I guarantee you they have so much knowledge and so much potentially job experience that they're going to be able to teach you and train you on how to have that foundation before you jump in and figure out what you really want to do in terms of specialty. 'Cause there's so many specialties in IT. There's so many that they don't necessarily even talk about. When I tell people I was a SQL developer for a hospital, they're like, what does that even mean? And it's almost, some of the projects that I worked on were almost more mathematic based than they were IT based. So we did a predictive analysis program for Swedish American many moons ago, and I helped on this one. And basically all it was based upon your pre-existing conditions that were in the EMR. We would assign a number of medications and type of medications. We'd assign you a number, and then we did a predictive analysis on whether or not, as you're getting discharged from the hospital, if you'd get readmitted within 24 hours. So you talk about a math nightmare or fun times, depends on if you like math or not. There was a whiteboard, and there was 4 of us, and we worked on it for 2 months. That's all we did. And there was a lot of monsters drank during this time, a lot of Red Bull, but we ended up with a product that actually, when I left the healthcare organization, was still being used. So, fun time.
That's pretty powerful because the hospital's funding depends on those patients not rebounding into the hospital. Oh,
Absolutely.
okay. You mentioned specialties. Let's talk specialties for a little bit. One of our individuals on the live stream would like us to dive into DevOps. So I'm guessing that is a combination of a couple of words. What is DevOps?
So DevOps is one of those. It's totally necessary, and I think Lee J was talking about it just a little bit, kind of graze of the surface. And I think if we had enough time, we could probably dive into DevOps for days. But it really,
6 interpretations, actually.
yeah, 6 probably the type of DevOps that's probably the most predominant right now is just kind of the monitoring, like developing the software that's doing all the monitoring for an organization. Okay. I think that's one of probably the bigger pieces that I see. The small to mid-sized businesses aren't utilizing DevOps nearly as much as they probably should. I think there's some pretty powerful pieces that could come along with it if they were actually to invest. But I think that's the monetary side is probably the hardest. But developing these software pieces for doing monitoring of the key infrastructure pieces within the organization. There are some software suites that are already out there, but for companies to purchase, and then the engineers end up just setting them up and doing the monitoring of the software itself. So I don't know how much you.
Yeah, no, I agree. The only maybe other component I could add is it's truly a blending of development, operations, and infrastructure. That's what DevOps is about, where you no longer, so in history, it's more about I have a web developer or a developer, and then I have infrastructure, and then I have desktop. Okay. And they go like this, right? Everybody goes, it's not my fault, it's your fault, it's an issue, whatever. So as part of this process of DevOps, or this evolution of DevOps, it's about, okay, you know enough about operations, you know enough about development, we can have good, intelligent conversations to come up with the best solution versus independent solutions that don't work well together. So that's kind of this little addition to what DevOps is.
Teamwork.
Yeah, well,
It's a redefinition of teamwork, I think.
yeah.
Okay, and now another one that was asked for is application development, as opposed to DevOps.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. So application development, being one of those niche kind of pieces of IT. Another scenario in the hospital, we built a tracking board from scratch where we took EMR data and actually moved a patient throughout their entire stay in the operating room. So if that person was in pre-op, in the surgical room, and then in post-op. So we developed it. I think that portion of IT is going to boom, but I think there's a lot of saturation in it right now. Thinking you're probably going to work on a team if you get into it, and basically you come up with these ideas in these firms. You come up with the idea, and then you develop an application and you actually publish it, right? So that's where all of the applications of the world come from. But there's new ones that come out every day, and there's so many firms that are involved with this. So if you're interested in it, getting into any coding, getting a start in any language, I think is going to be in your best benefit. You probably would start in Python because I think everybody starts in Python nowadays, but you won't end there. Python, get yourself a Raspberry Pi. You'd be surprised at what you can do. You can make oh man, what are those really fun? The Pi, like the Nintendo Pies. Oh man.
Oh, for the video games.
Yeah, so the video games. You can totally build one of those. Super easy. First step.
Legacy arcade.
Yeah.
Stuff.
If you're in college, maybe even starting to learn some of those coding languages, because I think no matter where you shape it, knowing coding whatsoever is going to help you in your career.
I agree.
So.
You just agree? No.
No, I agree that it will help you in your career. I mean, I did development, for an example, when I started out, and I found I didn't like it. It was more of a tedious thing for me, where you had to have a little more focus in order to be able to develop a good application, right? Mm-hmm. Where, like Eric mentioned earlier, I'm the guy that sees the butterfly and goes, ooh, butterfly, right? That type of stuff. So it was a little more difficult for me on the coding side, but having the experience allows me to sit in a room with developers and understand how it translates into operations, infrastructure, security, applications, process, people, across the board. So just getting the experience is a key component. The language, again, I would agree, it's not going to be a major factor to get the exposure, but at some point, usually developers decide on the language that they want to focus on. So just reaffirming what you said for the most part.
And knowing that there's different variations of programming as well. There's web developers, which I would call them programmers, but they are a whole different breed than a standard programmer. So.
No, I like that you're giving us a lot of possibilities to think about. As I was hearing you talk, I was reminded of our high school business incubator programs, Incubator U. And I had a privilege to mentor a team, and they were working on an application, and they got a hold of Raspberry Pi. And in a matter of a couple of weekends, had a operating prototype to put in the hands of their team. So I think there's so much potential, and that really goes to another follow-up question here is, okay, we've talked about how you learn the skills, how you get the education, those kinds of things. How do you gain some experience in the field? I heard you both talk about internships as you were introducing yourselves. Where does that fit in for folks who are thinking about a career in IT?
So I think internships are critical. honestly. A lot of, McHenry County alone has tons of different organizations that offers internships for many different positions, but IT is a big part of that as a whole. We do internships. Some are paid, some are unpaid, but if you really have interest, focus on where you want to try, right? And again, I will recommend that you try, one summer one type of organization, one summer another type of organization. Give yourself the variety and exposure so you can have a better understanding of what you want to do long term. So internships are critical. If you want to start off in a position like, hey, I want to be the support specialist, network specialist, cybersecurity specialist, education.
Everything Lee J said, high five. Yeah, just to follow up on that, 100%. Internships, I'm a firm believer that you're going to get so much valuable just information thrown at you during that internship, and you can't pay for that. Like, on top of the internship, and Lee J kind of went over this quickly, I think the important thing too is also don't pick one specific type of company. Or you could, if you really wanted to, like the large healthcare organization any of them that I've worked for, to do an internship for them, it looks vastly different than doing it for something like an MSP, like what we do. Where my techs, I actually have a few techs that had worked in the IT space previous to coming to me, and they were help desk level 1, and they basically their first comment to me is, I'm doing things that the engineers were doing. And I'm like, yeah, you are. And guess what? But my job as somebody's boss is to make them as the most valuable IT person that I possibly can make them. And then my second thing to do as their boss, as their leader, is to then retain them. Okay? So I take that same stride with interns as well, where and I think most companies will take this same approach with interns is, they're going to give you that valuable information that you're never, it's going to be very difficult for you to come off the street and try to get exposure to it. So yeah.
So how much experience are you, or education or certifications, what are you looking for to bring an intern on? What makes a great intern application?
So the experience, the interest, number one, in technology as a whole. Curiosity, I like that word that you used earlier. I'm going to steal that now. But the curiosity aspect about how to ask why, right? Mm-hmm. Why does this work? And not just here's why, or here's how to fix it, that type of thing, but why did it break in the first place? Sorry, I think I'm gesturing with them, Mike. But anyway, so that curiosity aspect is a huge part of it when we're interviewing new candidates. The other part of it is okay, if they have a strong desire in that industry or in the industry, then they should be pursuing some level of education typically in that industry. So we do look heavily at, okay, are they going to school for this, for their long-term planning, right? And on top of that, did they do anything on top of what they would have to do? So have they done any certifications and stuff like that? It doesn't really matter to me what certification is. It just shows that they had a desire and it's in the direction of their career. If that helps.
Not including me, but some of the best IT people that I've ever worked for, out of all the companies, I think one has had an IT degree, and it was an associate's degree, so perfectly good degree, but he had certifications. The highest paid employee that I've ever had, associate's degree and certifications, like the highest level Cisco certifications that you can have. Those I can't. There's no better way to judge your knowledge than actually having those to back up. A lot of people can study for an exam and pass the exam, but the proof to the pudding is really just when it comes down to having those and being able to earn them. So yeah, level of education. I'm open to about anything really. I mean, I have I have a bachelor's degree in public health. So if you want to talk about this pandemic and how, public health could have stopped it, I could probably have that conversation with you too. But, I can also talk, high-level networking with you as well. So,
Question about work-life balance. So we have determined that this is an industry that must be always on. Literally, people die if they are not. That it is constantly changing. Is there any work-life balance, or how do you define work-life balance?
all right, I'll go first. So work-life balance really also comes down from the top. It comes down from the leadership and making sure that you as an employee is, being fair to yourself and to the company. So work-life balance, it can be a challenge depending on the organization that you work for. But I am a very firm believer in work-life balance with my family and I. There's times where I do have to work in the middle of the night. Because most IT, if there is something crucial, it has to be done in the middle of the night. However, I have it set up with my staff and myself where if you work in the middle of the night, guess what? You probably don't have to come in the next day. Or if you do come in, you bring donuts and you show up super late, and it's totally fine. We make sure that we schedule those things, and it's really just being conscious of your time as well, because it is easy to get lost in, there's work to be done. I have to get it done, but also always being fair to yourself, I think, is really important.
So I'm hearing a balance between your regulation of your working conditions and finding the right employer. We talked about a little bit about interning to identify what some of those alignments might be, and it sounds like that's an important piece of work-life balance as well.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to this that I think it depends, right? Work-life balance means different things to different people. I love what I do. So for me, working on a Saturday, getting things done when it's quiet and I don't have the phone going off and everything is perfect for me, right? But I take off my Sundays, and maybe Monday afternoon, like Eric was saying, I end a little early, 3 o'clock, because I got to go to my son's game or something like that. So one of the beautiful things about IT that I've seen compared to some other positions in the industry is the flexibility that we have. The hardest thing for people in IT that I've seen over my career with people coming in is, can they shut it off, right? So at the end of the day, it's 5 o'clock, you're in a manufacturing job, you punch out, you leave, and you're coming back the next day to do the same thing. I'm working on a logic problem, and it's not that it's any better or any worse, it's just I'm working on a logic problem. Can I shut off and say at 5 o'clock I'm done with that logic problem, and then I'm going to start it again at 9 o'clock in the morning? For me, it doesn't happen. So I finish my thought, I finish my whiteboarding, or whatever it may be. So, but because I enjoy it so much, I've incorporated it into my work-life balance.
And Lee J and I tend to golf with each other every now and then.
Yep.
And it's great to have other individuals in our industry. And networking is huge for us, right? Not just networking to meet other business owners, but also people in the same industry, because having that collaborative, like, hey, I'm having this problem, are you also having it? And that also helps with that work-life balance, because if I can poke another person in my industry and say, hey, are you also having this problem? Because that can actually start his gears moving of, hey, have you thought of this and this and this? It might help me get through that problem quicker. So
I like
I
that.
agree.
Not a traditional this and that, but that I like that more the fluidity between that. Lee J, talk a little bit about small business ownership too, because your knowledge of IT led you to something that really is very 24/7, and that's small business ownership.
So I started it all wrong. let me start by that. So I grew up in IT as a technician, going through business process. So I'm thinking I know this stuff well, right? I felt like I knew it really well. So I started just going out there and putting up a shingle. I didn't even think about a business plan, didn't think about, you know, some of these different HR components, accounting components, depending on which hat I wear, which moment of the day, right? So it made me realize, beyond just the difficulties that I was facing, that I needed to kind of start in a more systematic way and leverage organizations to do what they do so I can do what I do, or people to do what they do so I can do what I do. So, and it's the same with IT, right? If you try to play an IT person, I will tell you, all the organizations we walk into, they know a guy that does IT, or a person, or it's my nephew or my niece or someone that's doing it today for this small business, right? And they're not getting the benefits that they could get from having a professional organization. Like, it would be like me having my, you know, my brother do my accounting and my books for me. Okay, great. When do I get the IRS notification for the audit? You know, that type of thing. So it's the same concept with IT. It's not a matter of if, it's when. So if you get hacked, oh, my niece, nephew is doing this. So it's like, oh, crap. So, right? So there's a lot of challenges in owning and managing your business. Try to focus on what is your core and what you want to do for growth of that business, and then identify the right resources and people that you can to help you in that manner. That's just, I think it's a simple philosophy.
Love that. There was something that you said, and it's an assumption that many of us have about a guy. So the IT, no, I mean, you gave a statistic, actually, because statistically, IT is a very male-dominated field. It's a matter of course that we say a guy. What are the opportunities that you see for women? Any guidance that you would have as more women think about entering this field? I'll open that to either of you.
Go ahead.
I honestly think it's equal. You know, in this field, you know, even coming up through the healthcare space, it's always gender agnostic at that point. The females that have worked for me, and I actually have a female technician right now. They are just as good, if not better, than their male counterparts, and I love that. You know, I love no matter how you shake it. So their opportunities are the exact same, and it all comes down to the organization too, and making sure that, you know, it's equal opportunity. You know, it's in today's day and age with how IT runs and how it functions. There'd be no gender gap in any organization in terms of you know, opportunity.
Love that. That was one of the questions that our audience members wanted to know about, because it sometimes when you are looking into the industry from outside, it just still feels very male-dominated. So encouragement to jump right in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's more of an engineering background, and I think engineering as a whole is still and has been male-dominated for the most part. So, but why that is, and like Eric, everybody's got the same opportunities as far as I see it anyway. Everyone has the same opportunities to be able to work or build a career in technology as a whole. The technology doesn't care.
Great. That's well said. I think that's a perfect takeaway. We have some folks who they haven't come up through IT, they've had careers in other areas, and they're wondering about a career shift into IT midstream. Eric, it feels like IT interrupted you in your career pursuit, but earlier on. Lee-J, you've had that interest in IT for a long time. Advice for someone who might be making a career pivot at this point?
So I would say for the career pivot is, again, get exposure, right? So even if it's it's like if you want to take night classes for school or day classes because you're working at night or whatever, you do that outside of what you're already doing. So I would love to be able to say just jump in both feet and see what happens, but the reality is it's too tough for a lot of people to be able to do that, especially mid-career. Right. So walk into an organization that you think you like or someone you know or whatever and say, can I try doing this? Most of them will say, sure, come on over, pull a chair. So get some exposure and get some experience, and then determine if it's the path you really want to take. And know the ins and outs of it to some degree on how it's going to affect your lifestyle. Right?
You mentioned something, we call it job shadow. Pull up that chair
Yeah.
and see and build those relationships and network while you're doing some of that preparation. I'll mention our partners on this program. McHenry County College and their Career Services Center has a job shadow program. So
Perfect.
they'll help folks that are interested in that career pivot find employers to sit alongside. And same with our partners at McHenry County Workforce Network. They're also great to help identify those employer relationships to do a little bit of that. So you'd say this is absolutely a field that would support a career pivot?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's also, I think, really important to figure out what you're passionate about. And if you find that you are in a career, you're not liking it, and you're thinking about IT, do that deep dive within yourself to figure out, am I passionate enough about it? Because I feel very strongly that if you find something that you're that passionate about, you can work as many hours as possible, and it'll never feel like you've worked a day in your life because you love doing what you're doing. And in the end of the day, I think Lee J and I both are kind of cut from the same cloth where, I will work endless amount of hours, and it's intriguing to me. It's like I talked about earlier with the bike analogy. I love the fact that it's never the same day. It's so different every single day, and it's exciting. Like I get excited for two different reasons when there's a potential new variant out there, a new threat that's out there. I get excited that, hey, there's today's going to be a completely unique day because I have to figure out how this thing works. But I also get excited because I'm like, okay, I'm going to bat for all my customers. Mm-hmm. The customers are probably the biggest thing. I think a lot of IT people, we like to be helpful. We like to be needed. And you'll find in this career that both of those things are always happening. You're needed. You're 100% necessary for the company to run, and they appreciate it. So.
Yeah.
We are conducting this webinar with masks on, so it's very obvious to those who might be watching the recording later that we are still in the middle of a global pandemic that has changed the face of where we do work. So I think my understanding of IT has been that it's one of the more friendly to not needing to be located in a brick and mortar place along the way. Is that a correct assumption, and how has the pandemic impacted the future of where we work?
So I'll put some comments to this. So for me, yes, you can work from anywhere technically. So if there's anything that's positive coming from this pandemic, which I know that there's not a lot, but identifying clearly that companies that have always said, we can't do this, are doing it because they don't have a choice. And for us, we're all sitting in the background going, yay, we've been telling you for years, that type of stuff. So what it does, though, is it does open up a whole nother level of challenges, because when you're in MCC, they have control of the entire environment. They built it, they designed it, they architect it, they secure it, they do everything associated with it. They control the applications you use and everything across the board. Now, you go home, you plug in your computer.
I plug in my personal computer and I get on our network.
Right? Now I just opened up this location from a security to 5,000 people in their homes, and the Netflix that they're downloading on the TV, all this different stuff. So, oh my Lord, the security risks associated with that just went through the roof.
Oh,
So,
Lee J, I
more
just want to
security
read
people.
one file. You're so dramatic.
So for my technicians, the remote working, we kind of were early adopters. Eater Casella and Co. has 3 facilities, three organizations, and we operate out of all 3 of those. So I run the technology wing. We're also an MSP, but the other piece of it is my technicians could work from anywhere. So I tell the individuals, if you need to work from home, like growing up in the healthcare wing of IT, also self-proclaimed germaphobe. I was like, if you have a cold, stay home. I don't want it. And this was well before the pandemic started. So now it's a germaphobe like me. It's like you sneeze, I'm going to spray Lysol on you, and then tell you to go home. Not really. My techs are, we'll work from anywhere. If you're on vacation and you want to have a day break, let's say you want to travel one day, and I'm like, okay, travel. That's fine. But that jet lag day where you're not really going to do something, you're like, oh, can I work? Can I work remote? And we have so much stuff going on. I'm like, sure, go ahead. So I think that the pandemic is kind of pushed it a little bit further, where the individuals have better setups at home now, where it's easier to work remote. But there's tech companies that have been remote the entire time. They don't even necessarily have a brick and mortar. Being technicians, or depending on what level you do, you may have stuff. So like there's just the day in and day out techs. They have break fix supplies, or server engineers have break fix supplies. So having a location for all those, it's not appropriate to be at your house, but you could. I don't know that you'd want it, but I think it really opens itself up that you could work for a company in Tampa. You could work for a company in California. It's kind of limitless at this point.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that to say that for our industry right now, though, there is a physical component that has to be there, right? Because we have to, if something goes down, a computer needs to be replaced, there's things that you have to do from a physical touch perspective. The other aspect for us, or at least for Stratus, but I'm sure it's probably the same for Eric and his group, is that insight in mind. When you're working with small, mid-sized organizations that typically look at IT as an evil necessity, right, versus an enabler to their organization, hopefully that's part of what we're trying to change, that mindset. And when we're working with these organizations, that insight in mind sometimes. So so I don't want to, there's definitely specialties. There's all these areas that you can do remote and never. I have one client. I'll give you an example. 23 years, she's been a side client of mine. I met her for the first time 2 years ago. Wow. Physically. We've done phone calls, video, and everything else. 22 years, right? So just to give you an idea. So it is completely possible, but it depends on the industry. It depends on the organization. It depends on the type of people that are running the organization too, from the top, like Eric mentioned before. So.
What have we not talked about that either of you feel is very important for our audience? We've covered the questions that they have shared with us that are on their mind. But as you're giving guidance and helping people understand IT as a career, the opportunities that exist, the future direction, what have we not talked about?
So one of the things that I generally have for my technicians, or even myself, every year, and I think this is a good thing to do personally as well, is not lose your creativity, even when you're working in IT. So I have goals for all of my technicians and for myself. Those are just the standard goals for, how break fix, those types of numbers. But then I have the 1 or 2 creativity goals. And one that I've challenged my technicians with in the past, and I'll say it here because I think it's a fun one: make something this year. Just make something. I don't care if it's technology related or not.
Just make something.
Make something. Don't lose your creativity. Okay. And maybe it's something that you would have never thought of. Maybe it's a simple fix for a problem, but it keeps your brain moving and doing different things. Because when it comes down to IT, it's not cut and dry on how solutions to a problem, right? It's not binary. It's not a 1 or a 0. You can approach it from 100 different ways. If you put Lee J and I on the exact same problem, we're going to come up with vastly different solutions on how to fix it, but it might be the same solution in the end run, right? But I feel it's that creativity piece that is often lost. You know, if you spend some time actually creatively challenging yourself each year, I think you're just going to benefit as a person.
So does that help keeping up with an industry that's always changing?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Because you'll have a creative approach. Your creative mind is still moving, so you're able to come up with a way to get to the puck. Maybe that's in a different method than everybody else getting to that puck, because you have that creative mind and you're still using it.
Yeah, I'll agree, completely agree with that. If I was going to add anything, I would say, you know, keep challenging yourself too, right? So one of the things I've noticed throughout my career is as I get older, it's harder and harder for me to adapt faster, okay? I don't know exactly why yet. I haven't figured this out, but I'm still working on it. But the reality is I have to push myself sometimes a little more than I used to have to learn new technology. Because I still enjoy it. It's not that. It's just that it's like, well, this used to do this. Why did they do this? You know, and it's like, okay, I realize I'm talking just like one of my clients said something. So I have to catch myself and push forward. The other thing I would recommend for people to keep challenging themselves in the career and growth and everything else, I learned something about 15 years ago, roughly. A mentor of mine said, at the end of the year when you're writing your goals, like you mentioned, we have the same thing where you have the annual goals. Write a letter to yourself that you'll open up at the end of this next year. And put in there what you want yourself to look like then. What are the things you would want to have accomplished? I do this on a personal and on a professional level, but I've also introduced it to my kids to be able to do this as a fun thing around Christmas time, as an example. So it's just another way for you to be able to say, hey, I did it, I didn't do it, or what do I need to change so I can be better or improve?
That's excellent advice. Eric, how do you personally stay current on all of the new innovations?
So, man, that's a million different ways to do.
I'm going to take some notes here.
You know, I love working out. I love doing things at the gym. So I find that podcasting, or listening to podcasts, are amazing. Like you can get into basically anything that you want. Just listening to somebody talk about it, like what you're doing right now. And if you can watch it, even better. And there's tons of technology ones out there. New tech that's out, things that are changing, basically any of those pieces. And then also subscribing to different websites and actually going in and reading them. So I find that helps even keep my brain moving all the time. But if I'm working on a project, like a big project that I'd call it being heads down, I'll often just pull up a podcast and have it playing in the background and I'm listening to it. There's times where I have to actually rewind and re-listen to it, but yeah, I think that's a really good way to stay current on a lot of what's going on.
And really accessible. There's no barrier to that. We can all get to that right now. All right. Well, we are about to wrap up. I have one final question for each of you, and that is, what is the most rewarding part of your job? And that's hard because, as you said, Eric, every day is different. But if you were to look back over, let's say, the last year, what's been the most rewarding part of your job? Lee J, I'll ask you to go first.
Most rewarding part. It's kind of strange. I've got to turn my hobby into my career. So for me, I get to do what I love. So with my clients and stuff like that, like Eric mentioned this earlier, in IT, it's usually about how you can be of service, how can you be of help. I'll add one more topic to that. I want to add value to for the clients that I'm working with, for myself, for my family, everything. So I want to be able to add a value. And if I feel like I'm doing that, which this last year, there's a couple clients where we helped their bottom line and stuff, it really gives you a huge sense of accomplishment. So value, I guess.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question too, because when I went from big healthcare organization to now running this MSP where we take care of the companies, adding value, 100%, I get that. But one of the things I moved my family from Marengo up here to McHenry, the McHenry land area, technically like right around Johnsburg, because I wanted to live in the community I was serving. I didn't realize what that meant at the time. I knew I wanted to do it, but I didn't realize really what it was going to mean. It's funny because Lee J and I have a lot of similarities in terms of customer base and everything like that. I'll be out to dinner, I'll be at DC Cobb's and I'll see a customer and I can, pick up their dinner for them because, thanks for being a great customer. I didn't realize what that was going to mean. Having companies that my family is able to take advantage of their services as well as them working with me. It's been so rewarding. Like I said earlier, IT people in the back of their mind, they really like being helpful, and a lot of these companies are grateful for what we're doing, and so it makes for a really cool, growing up where my daughter's saying, "Hey, everybody knows Dad." It's like, okay, yeah, all these small businesses, dance studios, things like that. Like we'll be out and about, and yeah, they're all my customers. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the most rewarding things for me.
And that's a good reminder for our listeners that there are great careers here in this county, that to build a career in IT, you don't have to go to a major metropolitan area, but you can be a member of the community, building a great career and building a family and a great lifestyle. So I'm going to let that be our final word, and just a sincere thank you for joining us. And if those of you who are watching or watching the recording have additional questions, feel free. It's easy to find me. You can just type Catherine Jones in on the MCC website. You'll find me. We can connect with these employers and others to help you on your career journey and career exploration. So thank you again for joining us in this industry networking in IT.
Awesome. Thank you.